Welcome, everyone, to the July 30th meeting of the Oregon Public Defense Commission Governance Subcommittee. We have a number of things on the agenda today. I'm going to make a slight change in the order of the agenda. We will start with discussing the annual board best practices survey. Executive Director Ken Sanchagrin will also participate in leading that discussion. And then we will move directly into what was the third thing, I think, on the agenda, the OPDC Executive Director Performance Review Process, because those two topics sort of meld into each other. And then we'll do the Audit Committee Charter and the complaint policy. So to start out with the best practices survey, as you know, that is coming up. And Mara, perhaps you could put that list up on the screen. Okay, thank you. So it turns out that we actually can change these best practices. Um, I don't think we have time to tweak all 15 or whatever of these, or however many of them we would like to improve on or make more relevant to us. I don't think we have time to do that with all of them before we have to get this out and done and back to Mara and Kim to turn in on time. But I think given our discussions that we've had before, we have really focused on numbers one and number two. Uh, and I think we do have time to tweak those. I would like to suggest a couple of changes. I think that first, Ken would like to discuss the process that DAS goes through in their every other year evaluation. And I know that you've had access to the DAS documents. There was a link on the agenda. So is this a good time to do that, Ken?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Um, the main item that I'm focusing on is number two. The executive director receives annual performance feedback. So backing up maybe just a second, these best practices are basically best practices that in the past have been recommended by DAS for boards and commissions to use when trying to assess whether they're meeting best practices according to the key performance measure. However, the actual content of these questions or the individual questions, that's what can change if a board or commission elects to do so. And the reason why I'd focused in on number two really stemmed from just some discussions I was having with the vice chair and the chair, just about whether and to what extent we needed to set up an annual performance feedback process so that you all could hopefully respond to that question annually in the affirmative. And one thing that has happened since these best practices have come out is that when Governor Kotek was first elected, she put down to all agencies, boards, and commissions a set of expectations that she had to be applied across the enterprise. And one of those expectations was that all executive directors or agency heads across the state receive a full 360 review every 2 years, or at least 1 year after they had been hired. And so one thing that I was just speaking with the chair and the vice chair about was whether we should try to align our best practice with that new DAS practice, because that DAS practice includes interaction with commission members as part of the full 360 review process. That way, we don't have to create a separate process independent of kind of the state process that's already been set up to happen every other year. And so that was the main motivation for having a discussion about this item. I didn't want the board to have to set up anything that was duplicative or redundant, but also I don't want to necessarily have, it's not that I'm trying to have fewer reviews. I was just trying to think of a way that we could streamline things. Um, like is reflected in the documentation that you sent out, I actually have gone through one of these reviews in my prior employment. And so I can certainly confirm that when you have a border commission, they are included in any list for outreach to stakeholders. The way it worked at CJC and the way it would work here at OPDC is the board chair and myself would coordinate with our HR director, Laura Sanchez in this case. So the HR director, we would submit to Laura a list of names. Usually, what they try to do is, in addition to the board or commission, you would submit names of folks who are stakeholders and then names of folks who are peers. And then the HR director, in addition to that, would compile other names of individuals to be included on this larger list for outreach. And so then when you see the materials that are um, in what was included in the packet, all of these questions would go out to the all of the folks on that list to then be compiled by the HR director to be discussed through that 360 feedback process with members of the governor's office, the director, the HR director, to try to come up with what are the general, points of, strengths, weaknesses, areas for development for the director. As they go through that review. My understanding and my recollection from the CJC process too was that the governor's public safety advisor was also in conversation with commission members, at least with the leadership at the commission, to solicit more, candid responses outside of just a survey. And so there's certainly robust interaction between the commission and the folks who are doing the 360 review every 2 years. And so that was why in our most recent conversations, we were thinking that perhaps turning this one item into a biannual or at least biannual feedback um, approach would both be good because it aligns with what DAS has in place, but then also it would allow you all to more easily fill out the survey for this KPM when you get it. And so I'd be happy to take any questions or to have any discussion that folks would like. But I think Susan, I covered everything that we needed to cover for that.
I have one question
Sure.
actually.
Yeah.
Looking over the DAS material that was linked, and in step one preparation, and then throughout, it talks about agencies with over 75 FTE use Gallup. Agencies with less than 75 FTE can use an alternative. And then elsewhere in the document, it talks about small agencies versus large agencies. And I have to say, I actually don't know how many FTE employees the agency has. And that's kind of embarrassing, but I don't. And do we come under the small agency heading or the large agency heading?
Well, that's a good question, and actually for that portion too, just for a point of clarification, the division, and so this was partially with how DAS had to roll out a lot of the governor's expectations. And this provision was much more focused on an employee survey that is done annually within the agency to try to ensure that all agencies are performing as well as they can. And so in the beginning, and I remember all this discussion because I was at CJC had fewer than 75 employees. OPDC, yes, we do have more than 75 employees. The real the the whole conversation as to whether you would use Gallup or not came down to the fact that most small boards, commissions, and agencies did not have the funding to pay Gallup to do that work. And so later they were able to opt in or opt out at a lower price point for Gallup to let them essentially tag along with the big agencies.
Okay.
The way that this process works for the Director 360 review, in some ways, it's largely up to the agency. When we were at CJC, we had a survey. I think we used Survey Monkey at the time, which always is a funny name to me, but basically it's a survey creation piece of software where all of these questions that they ask for the Director 360 review were just put into a survey so then they could load into a database. We could do the same thing at OPDC. We could use Microsoft Forms, we could use whichever way we would like to, but it would not necessarily have to go through that Gallup process.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Um, does anyone, Haley or Philippe, do you have any questions?
Nope, I don't have any questions on this.
Let me tell you the two tweaks that I would like to have the full commission consider. On number 2, this is the one that Ken was just discussing. As you can see, it now says Executive Director receives an annual performance feedback. I would like to tweak it so that it says Executive Director receives at a minimum a biennial performance feedback. That would include this DAS feedback, but would leave it open to us to add something if we should ever want to do that. I would suggest tweaking number 1. We had a lot of discussion at some point about performance expectations, and I believe that at our last discussion, we ended up saying, well, the performance expectations are set out in the statute. And so I would like to suggest tweaking number 1 to say executive directors' statutory performance expectations are current. Those would be my suggestions to go to the commission, and I'm happy to take any discussion on those 2 suggestions.
I don't see a problem. I mean, I think in some ways it kind of ensures, 100% compliance, which is kind of what you're looking for in this best practices when you say statutory. And I think that I don't know if I speak for everyone else, but I think generally folks are comfortable. It's just about getting with any process that seems straightforward and to comply with all the other directives of DAS and everyone else. It's just a matter of making sure that those are clear and that everyone knows about them. So I think that I think everything Ken talked about makes a lot of sense in terms of that. So I'm pro both.
Okay, Haley, you okay with that?
I feel the same way. I think the changes would be good. It makes sense to me.
And then in terms of clarifying the other 13 things that are on there now that we may want to discuss tweaking, but we can put that off. We're still going to put out the memo that Mara's putting together that indicates what the agency has done over the past year, or what the board has done and the agency has done over the past year, basing that on what has been presented at commission meetings. And that's just so that when commissioners get these KPMs, we don't each have to go through all of the agendas for all of the meetings for the past year to remind ourselves what we've done. Mara has gone through and done that for us. And so those will uh, be available. We can decide either to just make that available at the time these KPMs are sent out, or if people want to have a discussion about it, we would have to probably set a work group to do that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think just sending it out to folks makes a lot of sense. There's kind of constant movement on the commission, and so I think getting information to people is an important part of that. And so when they're answering that, being able to have something that serves in that regard, I don't think we have to have another meeting for it.
I hate to impose on people. Everybody's so busy and has so many meetings. Um, I tend to agree that giving people the opportunity to just read it is probably enough. Haley, what do you think? She's been distracted, I guess. All right, so that's what we'll do. Is there any other? By the way, I should have said at the beginning that I think that we probably won't have to go till 5:30. I think this is going to be an easy agenda. But anything else to be said on the annual board best practices? Okay, thank you, Mara. I think we can take that down. So Ken, the next thing on the agenda is the actual DAS performance review process. And you talked about that a little bit already. Is there anything else you think we should know about that?
I think that I think that I covered most things. I mean, if folks don't have other questions, then I don't think that I would belabor it. I am just wanting to make sure that for the things that were sent out in the packet, um, I want I am. It sounded like when you were asking your question that maybe some of the feedback or some of the information was more about the employee survey. So I do want to make sure I'd be more than happy to circulate to all the commissioners, especially in advance of the next meeting, or have Mara do it, all of the DAS information about the 360 review, because it actually also has all of the questions that they ask, in addition to just like the process. And so that folks could look and see what that looks like as well. In some ways, they're very similar to the questions you might get through, in any of these types of surveys. But yeah, I don't think that I have a lot of
I think
additional
the questions
information.
were, I'm sorry, I think the questions were here.
Or are they?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's what I was going to
okay,
say.
just wanting to make sure, just because of the
Pages
question about.
5 and 6, it says performance review questions. Small boards and commissions may choose to add additional questions that apply to their business.
Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, you do then. Okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure. Right, right.
And I guess, and so this is going to happen next year. Is that right?
It
Yeah.
should. I can look and see on their website too and see if we're listed.
So I talked to someone about it. It was actually, I think it was supposed to be in 2 years because Ken went from temporary to permanent recently, and so I'd reached out because we thought that we were due more recently on the schedule, and then I talked to someone and they basically said it was a 2 year window, so it's not even. I don't think maybe it's next June, but I think it's the following June.
Okay, and we can follow up on that. You're right that OPDC had been scheduled for May of this year, but that was, yeah, not. So I guess, yeah, my permanent seat came in March, and so that would not be there. I'm not, and that's a good question about exactly how interim periods fit into that too. But I can figure that out, and we can get back to you all on that before the meeting, I'm sure.
Okay. That'd be great. Thank you. So, but it's either going to be a year away or 2 years away.
Right, right.
Um, that gives us plenty of time to think about whether we wanted to add any additional questions. Although, are we a small board? I guess, are we a small board and commission?
We're not a small board, but we are a commission. It is funny that I'm one of the only folks who is invited to the large agency DAS meetings and the small board and commission meetings. There aren't very many of us who are large and a commission. We may be the only one, actually.
And so it's not small boards and small commissions. It's small
Right.
boards.
It's yeah, it'd be small boards and commissions. I almost feel like there should, even though there should not be, I feel like there should be like an Oxford comma there or something to fully demonstrate the division.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Oxford commas. I put them
As am
everywhere
I.
I can possibly put them, so I agree with you. But in any case,
So
what it means
sorry,
is that we can
I just
add, yeah.
I just found my emails with Krista Campbell at DAS, and she said that OPDC is due for review in June 2027.
Okay, that would make
June
sense.
27. Okay. So at some point between now and June 27, um, we can decide, I think probably in the fall, we can have a discussion of whether we want to add any questions to these. Certainly not something we have to do today. Yeah?
Right. And what I would probably do, just for the sake of having kind of the appropriate interactions, is for that work, I'd probably connect you with our HR director, who would be deploying the survey and doing all of that work too. And then also, as an HR director, she might have some good ideas on how to structure those questions.
Okay, that's a great idea. Um, so we'll schedule a meeting. Mara, if you don't mind putting this on your list of things not to lose track of, we'll schedule a meeting in the fall with her and with Laura Sanchez and see if there's anything else we want to add to that. Does that work for you, Philippe and Haley?
Yeah.
Any problems with that?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Um, moving along. Here is what's happening with the audit committee charter. Um, Scott and I have been, Scott and I had a uh, great conversation with a man named Eli Ritchie, who is the um, internal audit executive for DAS and also in charge of a committee that deals with internal auditors throughout the executive branch. And we submitted to him all of the questions and concerns that we have heard from anybody who wanted to tell us questions and concerns. So they came from, some of them came from the current audit committee members, some of them came from commissioners, some of them came from providers who have been talking to me and to some other folks on the commission who passed them along. Um, there has been no serial communication with anybody on the commission about any of this. It's gone to me and to Scott, who doesn't come under those guidelines at the moment. And his input has not been a serial communication with anybody on the audit committee. So we gave that input to Mr. Ritchie, and he is very happy to give us some education about internal audit in the executive branch. He's the one who basically knows all about it. And he definitely knows about the difference with internal audits for agencies that have a commission and agencies that don't have a commission. So that was one of the tension points that's come up. He is going to put together a document that answers or at least addresses all of the questions and concerns. And we're hoping that he will have the time to come to a commission meeting and introduce himself and introduce, at least tell us that he's giving us the document. He is not um, willing to ask questions and give answers at a commission meeting for a variety of reasons, but he is willing to take questions and hear concerns after people have had a chance to read his instructive document. So what we are thinking about is making that document available and providing a way for commissioners and staff members and stakeholders to give us in writing their additional questions or concerns. We will be able to give those to Mr. Ritchie, and he will then address those. And after we've got clarification and we're all sort of on the same wavelength about how it works for an agency and a commission like ours, we will then go through the process of tweaking the charter that we've been working on so that it conforms with the proper protocols. And we will take a look at a tweaked charter. The audit committee will take a look at it, and hopefully in relatively short order, by sometime early this fall, we will be able to present a coherent audit committee charter to the commission. That is the current state of the conversations that we've been having, and I'm happy to take discussion or answer questions or hear concerns.
What's the time frame for when he would have that document? Do you know?
I think he understands that time is of the essence and is planning to get it to us relatively soon, but I will work on getting an absolute it's Scott who is in contact with him on a more regular basis. I'm not, but I will get that information, Haley. I agree that's an important thing to know.
Sweet.
I think he definitely understands that we need to get this done. So he was, I have to say, uh, extremely knowledgeable, very clear about what he was telling us. And I think that people will benefit a lot from what he has to say. Philippe, do you have a reaction to any of this?
No, I mean, I think that I think this is something that's far outside of most of our wheelhouses, and it's good to get an expert, and so that we can kind of decide on what the right level of um, the right composition of an audit committee and kind of be in line with what we're supposed to be in line with. And I agree that you know, frankly, just getting it done with the least friction possible seems to be like the top priority. So it seems like this is a good path forward to get the expertise that we maybe don't have as a commission in making these types of decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I assume like most things, there will be people who are unhappy with some of it. And, um, but I think that, there are a lot of things that government has as a required protocol that people are unhappy with, so that won't be a new experience. But at least we'll know that when we're doing it, it's something that DAS thinks is the right way to do it. And they're the ones we sort of have to pay attention to anymore. So, okay, anything else on the audit committee charter? Okay, so the only other thing on the agenda is just an update to you all on the OPDC complaint policy. Kim is here at this meeting if anything comes up that is beyond what I can tell you. But here's what I know. The team is still awaiting input from DOJ. Um, what we know is that the policy, what they're coming up with is a broad policy and then specifics regarding the internal and external complaint processes in a process manual. So if I understand that correctly, there'll be a sort of general policy for all of OPDC and then very much specifics in a manual for each different kind of complaint or input. Um, the team is still reworking the policy. It's turned out to be a much bigger project than anticipated. I guess I'm not surprised about that. There's a lot of internal work in progress on both the policy and the process documents. But part of this internal work is that the team has taken all of the comments received, they've incorporated all of that feedback into their process and into these new drafts that they're working on. And they will probably want to bring the draft approach to a work group meeting before it goes to the whole commission. I'm not sure whether that would be in addition to or instead of meeting with this committee. That's yet to be determined. But at this time, there is no expected time when it will be done. And if that changes, I'm sure they will give us an update. I think they plan to give us an update as often as they can so that we are in the loop, but they're working hard on it. And it seems to be a difficult and sincere working effort. Any questions or comments about that? And Kim, for sure, if I've missed something or got something wrong, I hope you'll chime in.
That was perfect. Thank you, Chairman Ray.
Haley, Philippe, any questions or comments on this?
No, it just seems very ambitious.
Yep.
Yeah, nothing from me on that.
Yeah, it's ambitious, but I think we'll be in really, really so much improved shape when that happens in terms of our interactions with each other and with providers and other stakeholders. So I'm very grateful that people are working on it. We have an hour early come to the end of our agenda, which I don't think anybody will be disappointed at, but I will ask if there's any new business or new concerns that Philippe or Haley or Ken that any of you want to raise for this committee?
Nothing from me.
And nothing from me.
Nothing for me.
Okay, well, nothing for me. And thank you all for your time. Haley, please be safe with all that smoke and the fires. I hope everything's okay for your place and your animals.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been helping friends last couple of days evacuate horses, so we're working on that tonight too. So
Absolutely horrifying. Well, stay
yeah.
safe. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody. See you later.